Imagine waking up and getting a brand new open world first person RPG that you didn't even know existed a week ago, and that open world RPG also happens to be a darker and more mature version of Skyrim with more depth in its combat. Well, that's literally what Tainted Grail Fall of Avalon is. At least that's what it feels like to me after my first couple hours of playing the game. Now, if you haven't heard of it, this is an indie studio named Questline that has been developing this game. It was in early access where you could play the first act of the game and give feedback, which I didn't even know was happening. And because of the positive buzz, and because this game is genuinely pretty damn good, it's been getting a lot of players and kind of blowing up right now. And in my opinion, for very good reason. If you're an Elder Scrolls fan, you are going to feel right at home from the very beginning of this game, because after a very basic character creator that is nothing to write home about, you immediately jump into the game and you start off in a jail cell. And you're getting talked to by a prison guard who just gets absolutely blasted in the side of the head with an arrow with some mysterious guy who ends up saving you. Within this short dialogue with him, you are going to pick your class, whether you want to focus on magic, or whether you want to focus on archery or stealth with daggers, or just go a full strength build with two-handed weapons or a shield and a one-handed. This is where you're going to pick that playstyle. Because depending on what you pick here, it might give you different attribute bonuses that are going to increase your range damage, your spell power, or your melee attack power, or even increase different things like medium armor or heavy armor, etc. And you have this mysterious disease called the Red Death, and you have to find a way to cure that Red Death from you. And as you go through this prison, you're going to be finding so many different prisoners and be able to talk to them and see how the Red Death is affecting these other people in the world. And you will figure out from the very jump that this game is a lot darker, a lot more Dark Soulsy in tone than any of the Elder Scrolls fantastical, whimsical experiences that you have played before. But it also has all of those small objects and weapons and shovels and pickaxes and things that you can just interact with throughout the world and this prologue and game in general. And it blends that with a lot of survival-like mechanics that I think they do really well, at least in the early game here. Finding health potions, brewing health potions with different alchemy stations you find throughout the prologue in the game, as well as cooking stations where you mix different ingredients and find different recipes. All of this immerses you into the world immediately, both what's going on in the world as well as your character specifically. And you're going to need to use a lot of these items, specifically if you're playing on the hard mode in the early game, to get through this initial prison, because you are definitely going to get your ass handed to you on at least the hard mode in this game off the jump. And that leads me into the combat, because like I said earlier, this game has more depth, at least in my opinion, both in the combat and the character progression than a lot of other first-person open-world RPGs have. In this game, you're going to have a light attack and a heavy attack, which is pretty standard if you're using a one-handed or two-handed weapon, but you're also going to have a block, whether with a shield or even without a shield, as long as you don't have magic in one hand. Now, on top of this, there's also a parry mechanic. So if you do parry or block at the perfect time, they are going to get, or the enemy is going to get staggered, and you can get a couple free hits in, and you're not going to take damage from that block. But just like in Skyrim, you can also mix magic in here. You can have magic in one hand and a one-handed weapon and go through that way, but you won't be able to block, so there's a downside to that as well. You even obviously have archery in this game, which is going to be very similar to your Elder Scrolls-like combat. Archery, in my opinion, actually didn't feel as good, but it is here as well. But with all of these different combinations, you also have a dash. Think Oblivion Remastered, for example. It works very similar to that. And this dash is going to be a very useful thing, especially if you're not going to be blocking or parrying the enemy. So if you're running magic in a one-handed weapon, for example, or a bow, and you cannot parry the enemy, you can just dash out of it instead and get your free hits in that way. And in addition to all of this, you'll also unlock certain powers throughout the game, which I don't want to spoil how you get these powers, but these powers can do things like increase your damage, slow down time, etc. And these kind of, in my opinion, are similar to the Dragonborn powers or the extra powers you get in Starfield or other open world games, mainly by Bethesda. What I love about the combat and the combat encounters specifically here in the very early game is before you even leave the prison, you're going to find multiple different optional bosses that are going to drop pretty damn good gear, at least relative to where you're at in the game. For example, and it's a pretty standard gearing system, but finding something like a helmet that reflects damage to attackers right at the start of the game is awesome, or finding a ring that increases my maximum health or maximum stamina or maximum mana. All of that is great to find at the start of the game to further push into the build that you want to right at the beginning. You can even find scrolls throughout the prison that are going to give you new spells. I got one that was a blood transfusion spell where I could drain enemy health. But with these bosses, they even have short cutscenes when you first find them that just make that badass factor a little bit higher. The only problem with the combat, at least from what I've experienced so far, is how easy it is to cheese the enemies, because the enemy AI is not very good. I genuinely found a way within 5 seconds to cheese every single boss in the early part of the game. And this wasn't something where I was looking for a way and trying to get the boss stuck somewhere. No, I just happened to run into it. I guess another negative here is by the end of the prologue, you've already used daggers, you've used a two-handed sword, a one-handed weapon with magic maybe on the other hand. You've also used archery, etc. And with all of these different tools and weapons that you use, you're only using them after you create your class at the start. I don't understand why they don't have you choose your class at the very end, right before you go to the mainland, so that's where you can actually pick what you liked using throughout the prologue. Now, I don't want to spoil it, but you're also going to learn a lot more about the story here in the prologue. You're going to learn more about the Red Death. You're going to learn about other things that happen to be corrupting the world. And you're also going to have a very good, at least in my opinion, conflict between the character that saved you at the start of the game, as well as a character that you accidentally run into saving. That is a very big deal into the world throughout this prologue. In my opinion, they do a great job setting this up, and you get the sense through this conflict that there are going to be different endings, and there are different endings. I believe there's 8 different endings in this game, depending on your character's choices from the start to the end of the game, which I love. Now, when you get out of the prison and you've leveled up from all of the experience that you got within there, you'll be able to level up. And you do this by putting down a bonfire onto the ground or onto this beach area that you're at, and this will enable you to rest, this will enable you to cook, and this will also enable you to level up. And by leveling up, this is where you finally see that character progression that is a lot more expansive, in my opinion, than the Elder Scrolls games specifically. But it's also very similar in a lot of ways. Specifically with skill leveling up, you'll be increasing your one-handed, you'll be increasing your athletics and your agility by just attacking or by jumping and running into the game. And that's very similar to something like Oblivion and Skyrim. But when you level up, you can also increase both your attributes and use a skill point into specific skill trees. In my opinion, leveling up the attributes feels very similar to something like Dark Souls, specifically because you're doing it at a bonfire, but different attributes are going to increase things like you would probably expect. You can increase your melee damage, your spell power, your maximum stamina, your maximum health, etc. But because this is an open world RPG and there are a lot of NPCs and shopkeepers that you can talk to, you can even increase things like selling items to merchants for higher gold. You also can put a point into your skill trees, and these skill trees remind me of the constellations from Skyrim, except for there's a lot more of them, and you get the feeling immediately how much more in-depth this game can end up being by the end of it than a game like Skyrim because of how many different options you have going down to these different specific skill trees. And after this, you do go into the mainland where you can finally walk around and explore the open world and go on different side missions and side quests, go to different merchants and see what they have, etc. I was actually very genuinely impressed with the open world, at least again at the beginning of the game, because things that I didn't think were possible immediately were. Swimming, for example, this was actually before I even left for the mainland, was a thing in this game. And when I went to a shipwreck out in the middle of the water, there was actually loot there that was relatively good, an archery ring that increased my damage with bows. A lot of times indie studios and even AAA studios making ambitious open world games will cut corners on things like swimming and not have that included, or not have something at that shipwreck out in the open that you didn't even expect to be able to go to. And in addition to swimming, there's a lot of other systems here as well. As I mentioned, there's cooking and alchemy, there's crafting. If you have a shovel, you can dig. If you have a pickaxe, you can mine. In addition to this, there are mounts in this game. There's also a housing mechanic in this game where you can own your own home. And I'm not sure how much these will come into play in terms of being actually effective later on into the game, but the fact that they're even in here in the first place is pretty damn impressive to me. But before I wrap this up, one more negative that I quickly want to talk about that might push some people away from the game is it's not 100% completely polished. And albeit for me, the performance was pretty good. I know some people have had an issue with it even at the start of the game. There were a couple bugs that I ran into. For example, I tried to open a door and my entire screen just went black and I was in the middle of a boss fight getting absolutely cooked. I also had a crash a little bit after I left the prologue, which within your first hour, hour and a half of gameplay, having a crash is usually not a good sign for later on into the game. Like I mentioned, this was also a game where Act 1 was kind of the early access play space. So if this stuff is happening in Act 1, I can imagine it'll be a lot worse in Act 2 and definitely in Act 3. Even think Baldur's Gate 3 that did this. One of the best games of all time, but even they had issues as you got further into the game in terms of polish and in terms of content. Luckily, if these issues are very consistent for you or even worse than what I had, this was all within my first 2 hours of gameplay, so you could easily refund this on Steam or wait till a later date and then hopefully they fix these things. But even regardless of that, I've been very impressed and pleasantly surprised about how much fun I've been having and how good this game is in general. If you are a fan of open world RPGs, specifically Elder Scrolls games, and you don't mind obviously the whole game being in first person, this is 100% a game that I think you would enjoy and that I think you should buy for only $45 on Steam. Way less than a lot of these other open world games like Avowed that even at the start of this game, I think it has the potential to be even better. Now, if you know me, that's not saying too much, but in general, I think it's great to support these independent studios that obviously put a lot of passion into this game. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. I would love to hear down below in the comments, have you guys heard about this game, or were you kind of like me where this kind of just came out of nowhere? Have you been intrigued to buy it because of my video or other videos you might have seen about it? Have you already played it? And if you have, do you like or dislike the game and why? I would love to hear all of your guys' thoughts down below. Again, thank you guys for watching the video. If you're new to the channel, please like and subscribe. And for my returning viewers, thank you guys so much as always for the support. Please like this video if you like the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace!